The early 2000s is an era that many fans love and wish F1 would return to, the era of 3-litre V10s with rev limits that crept up and up and up until they hit an unprecedented 20,000 revolutions a minute. Put simply, these engines would idle at what most road cars redline at. It was an era of tobacco sponsorship, colourful cars, half-naked women next to said cars, and things that would make Twitter have a fucking fit over if it happened today. And while I'm not one for the "it was better in my day, new, bad, old, good," it really was a different time. When the local shop wouldn't let me buy the official PlayStation 2 magazine because the demo disc was rated 16+, but they would happily let me buy the F1 racing magazine that had half-naked women with totally not at all modified bazookas draped over Eddie Irvine's Jag. Stuff that would make 90s video game sex symbols like Lara Croft and Jill Valentine go, Jesus Christ, how do you not have back problems? But like I say, different time. But in this period from 1999 to 2004, Ferrari had gone on an unprecedented streak. 6 Constructors titles and 5 Drivers titles in a row. A streak of Constructors titles that wasn't beaten until last year. And at the top of this team were 3 men from 3 different countries. There was Jean Todt from Pierrefonds, France, Ross Brawn from Manchester, England, and Michael Schumacher from Herth, West Germany. Or just Germany, depending on how old you are. These 3 formed a Formula 1 dream team that surpassed Chapman and Clark in virtually every shape, form and description. While geniuses on track and at the drawing board, they also knew how to play politics. And while they were known for their brand of politics and for what they achieved on track, the fact is they all came to Formula 1 from the same place. Sports cars. Group C Endurance was endurance racing's attitude era, and I have on several occasions called it a Guns N' Roses concert at 200 miles an hour. Or if you're Peugeot, 250 miles an hour. And a lot of the big manufacturers had teams at that point. Jaguar, Mercedes, Toyota, Mazda and Peugeot all had factory teams or factory-backed teams run by third parties, to name a few. But I should backtrack a tiny bit, because when I said all 3 of them came from sports cars, Brawn had started in Formula 1, gone to sports cars and then gone back to Formula 1, and Todt had actually started in rallying. In 1985, Brawn had worked for the Haas Lola team and developed the THL1 and THL2 with Neil Oatley, who later had success with McLaren. He then moved to Arrows and designed the A10, which was the Arrows car and not the thing that goes. In 1989, Brawn left Formula 1 and then moved to Jaguar's sports car division. Jean Todt, meanwhile, had started in rallying as a co-driver and had retired from that in 1981 and become director of racing for Peugeot, at a time when Peugeot was suffering from huge financial losses and having a really bad image problem. While at Peugeot, he had created Peugeot Talbot Sport, and the success of the Peugeot 205 and its hot hatchback version helped turn Peugeot around. Because of the 205 T16 winning the 1985 and 1986 WRC title in Group B, which in itself was rallying's attitude era, Peugeots were cool again, and now good examples of 205 GTI are going for a lot of money. But to an extent, Todt had saved Peugeot. While on the driving side, Michael Schumacher had been making a name for himself in the junior categories, where he was signed to WTS in Formula 3, which was run by his manager Willy Weber. He'd won the Macau Grand Prix in 1990 by blocking later championship rival Mika Hakkinen in such a way that Hakkinen had smashed into the rear of the German and wiped himself out of the race. But Michael, meanwhile, won the race without a rear wing. But in that same year, he joined the Mercedes Junior program with Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Karl Wendlinger, and they were put into Peter Sauber's Group C sports cars. The car won at Sao Paulo in the final round of that season, and Schumacher was kept on for the following year. In 1991, Brawn was at Jaguar, Schumacher was at Mercedes, and Todt was at Peugeot, and the Brawn-designed Jaguar, run by Tom Walkinshaw Racing, which also had cars in the BTCC, Tom himself would later own the Arrows team, and then Tom Walkinshaw Racing later had an operation in Australia, which was then bought out by Holden and Mark Scaife, and apparently there was a dodgy business deal, but I'm yet to find out more about that because that's a story I want to cover. And while famously Le Mans was won by the Mazda 787B, the actual overall championship was won by Jaguar. At around the same time, Walkinshaw had purchased shares in Benetton and joined the Benetton team fully in 1992, with Ross Brawn in tow. But staying in 1991, as we're all aware, Mercedes had given Eddie Jordan $100,000 to give Schumacher a run at the Belgian Grand Prix to replace Bertrand Gachot, who had been locked up for assaulting a London taxi driver. Schumacher had impressed at Jordan, and Walkinshaw had managed to pressure the Benetton management into hiring Schumacher for the remainder of the season, forcing out their current driver in that seat, who was Roberto Moreno. So for 1992, Brawn and Schumacher were at the same team, thanks to Walkinshaw, while Todt saw out the end of the Group C era. In the background, Ferrari president Luca de Montezemolo had been watching what Todt was able to do with Peugeot, and was wondering if the same could happen with Ferrari. So in 1993, at the French Grand Prix, just after Group C imploded, Todt was now the general manager of Ferrari's racing division. It also has to be said at this time that Ferrari was a bit of a meme in the paddock. The longest serving team with all those facilities and brains and money and heritage had not had a Drivers' Championship since Jody Scheckter in 1979. Their pit crew was a joke, their strategy was awful, and Ferrari continued to use heavy, thirsty and unreliable V12 engines, while everybody else had moved to lighter and more fuel efficient V10s or V8s. Ferrari had hired Nigel Stepney, and he started sorting out the pit crew, instilling British Army levels of discipline into them to stop them from cocking up. I also can't find confirmation, but I would not be surprised if the return to refuelling in 1994 was pushed for by Todt so that Ferrari could continue using these V12s. But then at the 1994 Italian Grand Prix, just over a year after Todt took over at Ferrari, Gerhard Berger took the race win in a season that had been dominated by Schumacher's Benetton and Damon Hill's Williams. While Ferrari had only gone from 4th to 3rd in the standings in 1994 and 1995, the amount of points scored compared to their 1993 results was massive. Todd's master plan was building Ferrari back up to the top, and he needed a driver to be able to do it because Alesi wasn't living up to the hype his early career would have suggested, and Berger wasn't getting any younger, so Todt approached Schumacher and asked him to drive for Ferrari. Schumacher wanted the challenge of building Ferrari back up to the top and agreed, and in exchange for Schumacher, Berger and Alesi went the other way to Benetton. The 1996 car was unreliable. It improved in the latter stages of the season and Schumacher won 3 races, but the foundation was there. But then in 1997, Rory Byrne and Ross Brawn came over from Benetton at Schumacher's insistence, and the rest, they say, is history. Ferrari's strategy became much better under Brawn, such as the "Hey Michael, fancy banging in qualifying laps for the next hour or so" strategy from Hungary 1998, and while having a slightly inferior car to Williams in 1997, the strategy of Brawn and the talent of Schumacher stuck it to Williams and Villeneuve for the season, if not for that moment at Jerez. But then 2 years of rotten luck. At the championship decider at Suzuka in 1998, Jarno Trulli stalled his car at the race start, so the field had to go round again on another formation lap so that Trulli could filter to the back of the grid. But while McLaren had shoved dry ice into Häkkinen's car and done everything it could to get rid of any excess heat, Ferrari had left Schumacher's car alone by comparison. And as I mentioned in my video on dual clutch systems the other day, it's thought that when they lined up again for the second start, Michael's clutch got too hot and slipped, so the car just stalled because there was no anti-stall devices back then. So as had happened with Trulli, although Jean Todt is seen being very animated in the pit lane trying to somehow get around that rule, they sent Michael to the back and he had to go on this mammoth comeback drive. Then Michael got a puncture and Häkkinen cruised to the victory. Then in 1999, brake failure on the first lap of the British Grand Prix put Michael in a wall at Stowe and he broke his leg. And Eddie Irvine almost won the driver's title and probably would have had an easier run to it if not for an absolute meme of a pit stop at the Nürburgring. But in 2000, they cracked it. Michael won driver's title number 3 at the time, and the team dominated for the next 4 years, with 2 absolutely monstrous cars developed in that time, the F2002 and the F2004. But in 2005 or so, Luca de Montezemolo had become bored with it being the Michael, Ross and Jean show, and it was rumoured that Todt and Schumacher had become far too powerful for Luca's liking. While Ferrari had been winning, Luca had felt that things weren't right, such as Todt allegedly organising sponsorship of the team behind Luca's back, and Todt and Schumacher doing their own thing as opposed to being told what to do by the actual president of Ferrari. There was then a massive fight of politics involving Kimi Raikkonen's manager that ended up sending the wheels turning so that in 2007 there was no Michael Schumacher on the grid. Fernando Alonso had ended up at McLaren because Ron Dennis had reacted to the potential of Kimi leaving McLaren, and then that led to Raikkonen at Ferrari. Now if that sounds like something you want to hear more of, I covered it a very long time ago and it's probably due a revisit because it's a very, very interesting story, real or not. Brawn left Ferrari in 2006 along with Michael and took a year off and joined Honda in 2008, just as the global financial crisis took over. When Honda abruptly left F1 at the end of 2008, he bought the leftovers and started Brawn GP, where a car with virtually no updates over the season won the driver's title with Jenson Button and the Constructors' Championship between Button and Barrichello, making it the only team in Formula 1 history to win the Constructors' and Drivers' Championship in every season it's competed in. Yes, there's a massive asterisk next to that one, but hey, it counts. Todt, meanwhile, left Ferrari at the end of 2009 and was then elected as Max Mosley's successor as president of the FIA. He's currently on his third term, but I'm thinking who might replace him. Yeah, leave any thoughts in the comments about that one, because he beat out Ari Vatanen to the job in the first place back in 2009. And I could see Vettel or Grosjean doing that job one day. I think they'd be perfect for it. And then there's obviously Schumacher, who suffered a skiing accident in 2013 from which he has yet to recover, if indeed he ever will. We actually don't know what's going on with him. The family's being very, very secret, and, you know, that's their decision. You know, as fans, you're not entitled to know what's going on. If there's nothing to report, there's nothing to report. But, you know, I do hope we get to see him one day in some form, you know, in the paddock. Maybe if Hamilton gets number 8, he might turn up. Who knows? But anyway, that's how Ferrari's dream team came to be. If you've learned something here today, give the video a thumb up, and for more like this, why not subscribe and get that bell notification button clicked so you never miss out on a future video. Massive thanks to the good folk of Patreon who continue to support this channel, and if you want to join them or just join in the Discord chatter, I'll leave all relevant links down in the description box for you. So until next time, I've been a less digested Ada Millward, because the camera is looking pretty good today. I'm going to need to save the settings and somehow get this right again. But yeah, let me know how this all looks as well. I'll probably need to get rid of some of this dead space above me. But hey, I've been Ada Millward. Have a great day wherever you live in the world. I'll see you all again soon for another video. So until then, goodbye.